Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Premier Football Podcast on PFP Media. Joe's got his new laptop. This week on the show, Ireland are still shit. England's opposition are still shit. We look ahead to the Qatar World Cup. And yeah, that's this week's show. Joe, you've got your new laptop. You buzzing?
I am buzzing, Rafe, and do you know what? I'm glad that I don't support the Irish national football team, because if I was supporting Arsenal and this Irish football team, I really don't think that I would be able to take it. I mean, this is as low as it can possibly get. This is as low as it can possibly get. The string of results that Arsenal, I'm so used to saying that, the string of results that Ireland have put together in recent times since Stephen Kenny took over, culminating with the 1-0 defeat at home to Luxembourg.
Yeah, look,
over the weekend is just as bad as it can get.
They're now without a win in 9 games. They scored 2 goals away to Serbia. The first 2 goals in, I think they went 7 games without a goal before they netted those, and they capped off the international break with a home defeat to Luxembourg. Luxembourg, to put it in perspective, has a population of 330,000 people, a quarter of the size of Dublin.
Luxembourg is a city. It's just a city.
It's a small city.
It's a small city in kind of sandwiched between the Netherlands and Belgium, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
maybe bordering France as well. It's in that little area. It's a small city. It's a very rich small city. Obviously, it's heavy into banking, but I mean, in terms of that doesn't necessarily equate with producing good footballers. And we've seen over the years that Luxembourg, along with the likes of San Marino, Liechtenstein, Andorra, these tiny almost city states, I suppose you could call them, a relic of the past, if you will, they're not very good at football. And for Ireland, and I mean this is probably the worst. This is the worst Irish team we've seen in our lifetime. The team under Brian Kerr was pretty bad.
Steve Staunton was pretty bad as well.
Steve Staunton was pretty bad as well. But I mean, this is just, it's not all on the manager. I mean the quality of this players he has to choose is really, really bad. The League of Ireland is an absolute mess. There's nothing in grassroots football in Ireland. I mean, it's a really someone who would care. I mean, I care, but I don't care the same way as you do, obviously. But like, what needs to be done here? Like, this is how do Ireland get out of this mess?
Look,
is it as simple as sacking Stephen Kenny?
You make some good points about the state of Irish football, and I don't want to get straight into getting the boot in on Stephen Kenny, because it is a poison chalice to a degree. The FAI is completely skint, and I mean it's beyond skint. Like it's administration level skint after John Delaney has moved on now. There was all sorts of FIFA and UEFA grants that were put on hold while those proceedings were being sorted out, and there's a real lack of money. The lack of fans going to football matches, obviously international games and League of Ireland games, has had a massive impact on money for the FAI as well. But these are all long-term issues. Ireland has never developed its own players. We've always been reliant on British clubs developing players for us. And yeah, look, at the moment, there is not a brilliant crop of players. I think there's some optimism about some of the young players coming through. The under-21s have been quite good in recent years, but these guys are all still kids. You know, it's too much to expect them to be carrying us through. And that's part of the issue that some people take with Stephen Kenny is that he's trying to fast track some of these kids through into the senior team. He's left out players that would have been regulars in the team for years and years. And the circumstances with which he took over really cursed it for him, because Mick McCarthy managed to get through the entire Euro qualifying campaign, only losing 1 game. There were some dire draws, some nil-alls, some 1-alls, games they should have won that they didn't, games they were far too conservative, and it was painful to watch. But he had us on the brink of qualifying for what we thought was going to be a tournament played on home soil, and everybody was buzzing for that. We were in a playoff with Slovakia, and Slovakia were missing key players through injury, and everybody fancied us. But because of the pandemic and because the tournament was delayed for a year, Stephen Kenny was announced as the new boss prior to these playoff games and prior to the tournament rather than after it. And I think if he had taken over after the tournament, win or lose, that mixed kind of chapter would have ended properly. And Mick McCarthy is an incredibly popular man in Ireland. He got us to 2002 World Cup. Obviously there was the falling out with Roy Keane, but in recent years, since he took the job back over, he seems to almost have swung public opinion on that whole situation as well.
Let's look a little bit about when Ireland have been quote unquote successful in international football. And of course, successful for Ireland is qualifying for a major tournament and not getting knocked out in the group stages, I would say. Progressing through the group stages. Would that be correct to get to the knockout round?
That's the ultimate. Like, to get to the tournament is the aim, but to get out of the group is celebrated.
So we're looking at 1990, 1994, and 2002. And who were the managers in charge then? It was Jack Charlton and Mick McCarthy, who were both English managers. I know Mick McCarthy played for Ireland internationally, incidentally under Jack Charlton, but listen to his accent. I mean, he got about the strongest Yorkshire accent you could possibly have. So he obviously grew up in the UK. And what both of those managers did was that they tapped into the pool of Irish descendants playing in English. In the English leagues, we could think of the likes of Tony Cascarino, Matt Holland, people like that, who did very, very well for Ireland in the 90s and then 2000s. Ireland have gone down a different route. I feel like the Kenny option came too soon. There should have been someone in between Mick and Stephen Kenny if they were going to do that. If they wanted to bridge the gap between, a conservative style of football, looking to bring in players from who have Irish descendants to then going to all out, like we're gonna go for the grassroots option.
If I can touch on that for a sec, I think the way in which Kenny was announced was absolutely diabolical. It's the kind of thing that you'd never see anywhere else. I think it was even the start, or relatively early in the qualifying stage, before Mick had put this run together, they announced that Kenny would be taking over after the tournament. And nobody really knew how to feel about it. And then McCarthy went on this run of not losing games and putting us in a position to qualify and increased his popularity and seemed to be having these players genuinely overachieving. You look at Sheffield United in the league last year, genuinely overachieving for the players that they had. And this is what McCarthy, obviously we weren't playing that kind of football, but these were the kind of results, or at least if you look at the table, this is where we were getting. We were on par with the likes of Denmark and Sweden, who are decent mid, lower tier footballing nations, rather than losing at home to Luxembourg.
Let me ask you, what style of football did Denmark play? What style of football does Sweden play?
Man, they've got big target men.
Yes, they play a conservative. They know that they don't produce. Every now and again they produce a Brian Laudrup in Denmark, or Christian Eriksen, or a Zlatan or Henrik Larsson in Sweden. But by and large, they're tall, big Nordic men who are tough to play against when they physically impose themselves on the opposition. Likewise, our Irish people are traditionally pretty big. I know that probably the biggest Irish lads go off and play rugby and GAA and not football. But at the same time, Ireland do produce a few big lads. And when Ireland have had success, it's been utilising that strength and that grit and that determination in a pragmatic way. I don't think that Ireland have any right to be trying to play expansive football.
In that qualifying campaign that I touched on, the top scorer was Shane Duffy, obviously a central defender who scores bag loads of headers.
Yeah, I mean, in years gone by, the classic Ireland goal, unless it was Robbie Keane scoring, was a Richard Dunn header from a set piece. Like that, it was either going to be a Robbie Keane finding a way, or else Richard Dunn scoring from a set piece. I just don't think Ireland. Yeah,
and look, I mean, the discussion with friends this week has been, but we're playing more attractive football now. It's more enjoyable to watch. Well, look, we were all falling asleep watching Ireland before. Genuinely, people would doze off during the game, and you'd wake up after an hour, and it would still be 0-0, and you'd say, "Jesus, I didn't miss much, did I?" And international breaks they were dreaded, but at least there was a sense that they were for something. When you're working towards a tournament, we're now 2 games into this qualifying campaign, and we essentially have no chance of qualifying. So that means that for all of the remainder of 2021, 2022, the first half of 2022, there's nothing to play for until after the 2022 World Cup. We can start looking ahead for the 2024 Euro qualifiers. So we already know that it's going to be at least 3 years before Ireland get anywhere near an international tournament, and it's incredibly deflating knowing that international management is a results business. You do not have time to coach the players. You have got to work with what you have available to you. You can't go out and buy new players that suit your style, or implement a long-term plan about bringing young players. That's not what it's about. It's about the next game. And if you can get the chance to take a young player and you're there for a few years and you can bring them up and make them part of your team, that's fantastic. But that's not what you're there to do.
Yeah, I think that you can. I completely agree, but I think you can instill a new culture, but it takes years, and it takes resources, and it takes investment in grassroots football over a period of. I mean, we're talking about 20 years or so. If you look at how Belgium have grown since the 1990s to what they are today, that's, I think, is probably, they haven't won anything, but they've improved the most out of any international side. Perhaps I could throw England in there as well.
I was hoping you were going to, because there's a perception that England have been playing considerably nicer football under Gareth Southgate. But if we look back, well, he's considered to be a progressive manager because I don't know, he picks 3 midfielders.
Yeah, I mean, he's considered to be because he's an FA darling, because he's a yes man, isn't that? I would say so. I watch England pretty regularly. I'm not a staunch England supporter, but they're my national team, and I watch them when I can. And I mean,
how many goals from open play did they score in the last Euros or the last World Cup?
Yeah, a handful at best. A handful.
Harry Kane scored penalties and headers from corners and was top scorer.
Yeah, this is it. No, I completely. I mean, Gareth Southgate he's changed this time, but he's been playing 5 at the back for a long time.
But play to your strengths, though. England are a big team as well, and look, there's nothing wrong with getting yourself to a World Cup semi-final by scoring goals from headers from set pieces.
Of course not. But when the press are trying to say that it's something else, then that's. Then there's a bit of an issue. Just to kind of finish up on Ireland, maybe before we go onto England, I think from an outside perspective is what is most embarrassing about all this is that when you see national teams like Scotland and Wales do so much better. I mean, especially Wales, obviously reaching the semi-finals of the Euros in 2016, and they have tiny resources. The majority of their resources go to rugby, not to football, and they have a pool of about 1.5 million people to pick. That's their population.
Yeah,
their pool of players is far. And I know in Ireland, obviously, like I've mentioned, rugby and GAA are probably more popular than football.
Yeah, both of them
would say. But at the same time, Ireland would have a bigger pool of players. But that to have Scotland and Wales both qualify for this upcoming Euros, and
Northern Ireland in recent years have outperformed.
They have.
Massively.
I was going to mention them, but they haven't won an international match since 2019, so I didn't mention them because their form has dropped off a cliff. But yeah, but prior to that, they had improved a lot. Yeah, so I think I suppose
the question now is, like I said, with nothing to play for essentially over the next 2 years, there probably is no harm in allowing Kenny to take charge of the rest of the Euro campaign, because I mean, if we can't qualify, we can't qualify. If he knows the young players and he feels that he can bring them through into the senior squad and help to develop them, well then if this process is going to take years, now is the time to do it, because there's nothing happening over the next 2 years. But he's now gone at his first 9 games without a win. The record is 12, and you do not want to be the least successful manager in Irish footballing history. You do not want the longest consecutive run without a win in managing Ireland, because that is an awful title.
Yeah, of course it is. I mean, I think if they were going to sack him, if I was in charge and I was going to sack him, it would have been a reaction to the Luxembourg defeat, being like, listen, Stephen, that this is across the board for anyone was in charge for this. This is completely unacceptable. You cannot be losing at home to Luxembourg, especially after the results you've put together. I think considering that hasn't happened and the amount of faith they've shown in him, the way he was appointed, as you've mentioned, I think it shows that he's the FAI's man for the long term. And if he is, then he should be given time to try, because it is a difficult project, and it's I don't envy him what he's trying to do.
No, but man, look, he played 5 defenders at home to Luxembourg.
Yeah. Again, like, yeah. When you dress it up,
and we didn't score a goal.
Yeah.
What kind of progressive football is this? You know, we're not making chances. It's not even like we our strikers are missing chances. It's sideways passes between the defenders and the midfielders, because there isn't that genuine quality there to help break down these teams yet. And that's why Ireland have always been traditionally so Route 1, because we tend to lack that quality in central areas. But look, anyway, we've banged on enough about Ireland being absolutely rubbish. England's opposition apparently is too poor, Joe. They want to kick these guys out of the qualifiers, have them all do pre-qualifiers. England can play some international friendlies against some top teams that are worth far more money in terms of TV deals, and maybe we can just send them straight to the tournament.
Something like that. Yeah, no, I mean, I think the reaction from the English press, I should say, rather, to these 2 wins, and I mean, if you take away the likes of San Marino from the qualifiers, then you don't get the results like Luxembourg beating Ireland, and those results do happen from time to time. I think the Faroe Islands picked up a win over the weekend as well. Can't remember who they were playing, but I think they might have done.
I think Montenegro have won their first 2 games as well.
Yeah. A lot of the Balkan sides have improved a lot recently. North Macedonia have qualified for the Euros. Albania have a lot of much better players than they've ever had before as an independent nation. A lot of players playing in Serie A for pretty good teams.
Group G has Turkey and Montenegro at the top, ahead of the Netherlands and Norway after the first 2 games.
And Turkey went to Amsterdam and won 3-0. And then I think they beat them both away, and then they went to Oslo and they beat Norway 2-0 or 3-0. Unbelievable.
Yeah. We'll touch on Norway a little bit later, so continue with England. Yeah. But that was the greater point anyway, is that these minnows are capable of winning games.
And on England, I think playing San Marino and then Albania, I think that the bare minimum is a 5-0 against San Marino and a 2-0 against Albania. I mean, I didn't expect too much more. I wouldn't really expect like 7-8. You can't really expect more than 5-0, can you? Like, there's only so many minutes in a match, and any more than that is a bonus. Against Albania, I think 2-0 is probably like I'd be surprised if Albania have centre backs playing for top 6 Serie A teams. So I would be surprised if England went and beat them like 4-5, 6-0. Albania are much improved in recent years. Like, I think they're 2 good results, but again, it's the absolute bare minimum when you look at the players and the resources that England have available in comparison to San Marino and Albania. It's the absolute bare minimum. So the reaction of the press praising a lot of the players who have come in. I saw a lot of praise for Jesse Lingard, for Ollie Watkins, James Ward-Prowse. I mean, if you can't impose yourself as a midfielder or a forward against San Marino, when are you going to impose yourself?
Yeah, but at the same time, you can only play against what's put in front of you. And I'm sure if Ireland had swatted Luxembourg aside 3-0, everyone would have said, "Oh yeah, well sure, look, it's only Luxembourg." At the end of the day.
Yeah, I suppose. I think at the same time, Luxembourg do have a couple of players who are playing relatively good standard of football in the Portuguese league. Fernandes, who scored the goal, played in the Portuguese league. There's a couple playing in Bundesliga and the Eredivisie. So they're not quite as bad. They're not quite as bad as perhaps we've made them out to be, and that they've been in recent years. San Marino, I don't think you can say the same for.
No.
I think like with England, the bare minimum with England is to top the qualifying group. England always get a very favorable qualifying group. So the bare minimum is to be putting these teams away. We'll know a lot more about England when we see them play in the Euros, and then we'll be able to see how they'll fare in the next tournament in Qatar, in the World Cup.
we'll get on to
that, I'm sure. Yeah.
To round up a couple of the other results, you touched on Turkey there. Obviously taking down the Netherlands and taking down Norway. I mean, I was going through the Turkish team the other day, and Ozan Kabak was the only, and Söyüncü were the only players that I actually knew, and Kabak was on the bench for the Norway game as well.
Yeah, they have a lot of good. Merit Demiral, right? He plays for Juventus. Turkish centre back, plays for Juventus. They have Hakan Shakan. I can't pronounce it.
Don't do it to yourself.
Yeah. They're number 10 who plays for AC Milan, whose contract is up at the end of the season, so he's a good player. Burak Yilmaz, who spent years in playing at the top of the Turkish league. Very good centre forward, certainly good enough to be scoring goals at international level. Man, they have a very good team. From what I've read on, I seem to have I seem to follow a lot of Arsenal fans who have Turkish descent on Twitter, so they would be posting regularly about this. So from what they are saying online, this is like the best that they've been since 2008 when they got to the semis of the Euros.
Oh wow!
I mean, they're really excited about this current crop of players, and I mean, to be fair, those two results that they've had, everyone was talking about Norway, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the Netherlands, we know the Netherlands are not at their best and haven't been for some time, but they're still, on paper, you'd think better than Turkey. So that's an emphatic win. And then everyone's talking about Haaland and Ødegaard, and Turkey go and they put them away and they haven't conceded. I think that's the most impressive thing, is that how good their defense is and how good the crop of young defenders they are. They have about 5 or 6 quality centre backs, man.
This is what international football is all about. It's about not getting beaten, not losing games.
Quite agree. Yeah. Quite agree. Not conceding goals.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for it. Look, Norway, Joe, wore the pro human rights t-shirts, the human rights on and off the pitch in both their games. Germany followed suit, and there have been lots of calls in Norway, if the senior team do qualify, to eventually boycott the tournament. I don't think that they've officially announced whether they will or if they won't. Lots of FAs have come out and said that they support human rights around the world, but they won't be boycotting the tournament. FAs like the Dutch FA. Are there real questions? First, I'm going to ask about the World Cup in a minute, but I think firstly it'll be interesting. Obviously, Haaland playing for Norway, wearing these human rights on and off the pitch t-shirts. I think it'll be interesting to see which club he moves to next year. Should he move to Barcelona, PSG, Manchester City, or Chelsea? I think those images may be thrown back at him at some stage if he's earning £500,000 a week on the back of a shady oil oligarch. But in relation to the wider question about the tournament, obviously the Guardian released a report last month which revealed that over 6,500 migrant workers have died in Qatar in the last decades through construction projects on these stadia.
It's slave labor.
It is,
There's
and
literally no other way to put it. It's slave labor.
They're not even migrant workers, as many of them would have been recruited for an initial fee to come over. Upon arrival, they would have had their documents taken off them so that they could not leave the country. And many of them haven't been paid for the best part of the last year. That those are only the official reports as well. I'm sure lots of these guys have gone unpaid for considerably longer than that. I've seen video images of the dormitories and then the areas that they're sleeping in, about the size of a normal double bedroom, with maybe 13 or 14 guys sleeping on bunk beds around the room with cot mattresses laid out on the floor. And the Guardian report, the official numbers suggest that 7% of those 6,500 deaths are by suicide. And I would imagine that the actual number is higher than that. But that is at least 500 confirmed suicides in the construction project. Man, this is awful.
I mean, man, we have. This is true. Good NGOs like Amnesty International and good newspapers like The Guardian are reporting facts. We know this is true. We see every now and again images are leaked of this. It's the same as in Xinjiang in China. We know what's going on. It's not, no one's making this up. I don't really want to make comparisons to past atrocities, but let me ask you this: what happened to South Africa under apartheid law?
Major international tournaments were boycotted by countries around the world.
Exactly. South Africa weren't allowed to compete in international sport. We knew what was going on in South Africa back then. We know what's happening in Qatar and in China. Why are Qatar firstly
You
allowed
know
to
why?
compete, but
We know why.
secondly, yeah, exactly, it's because of the money. But this is just, man, I think that the if Norway and Germany were to qualify and especially a team like Germany, but any team, even in Norway, to boycott it, that would be huge. That would be brilliant, and that is the right thing to do. This World Cup should not go ahead. Man, it's not
Even
just
even the circumstances of which the contract was awarded to Qatar in the first place.
Mm.
Half of FIFA was sacked on the back of this because of the bribery scandal that came out. Like the World Cup was bought illegally through bribery on the back of money generated through human rights infringements.
Can I ask you something? Will you watch it?
Joe, I would want Ireland to boycott it if they were going. Will I watch it? I mean, I don't know, to be honest. I don't know.
I don't think I will. I watched the last one. I mean, there's a lot of talk about Russia the last time because of its human rights abuses, and they are awful as well. But at the same time, it's not the same level as this. It's not the stadiums in Russia weren't constructed off the back of slave labor.
Brazil was maybe more comparable. Lots of people died building stadia in Brazil, but I don't necessarily think that that was classified as slave labor.
That was just poor construction. That was just construction
reckless
sites that weren't regulated properly.
Yeah. The thing about
go ahead.
The thing about these numbers, Joe, is that they're not even being denied by the Qatari government. They say that these deaths fall within the expected numbers for people living in Qatar and for the demographic of people that they are. These are all workers from South Asia, from Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, some from Africa, some from the Philippines. And they're saying that this is normal. They would expect this many people to die doing any job.
Yeah.
As much as the loss of life is regrettable, I think they say it's to be expected, and it's part of their business model essentially.
Right. So they work people to death. They treat them so poorly that they either die or they commit suicide because they're in such shocking conditions.
A massive number of those deaths, I think something like 40%, are classed as natural causes, which it means that there was no autopsy carried out, and the most likely event is that they died from dehydration or heat stroke, essentially. If they're doing outdoor manual labor in 48, 50-degree heat in the middle of a desert with lack of nutrition and lack of fluids, there's only really going to be one outcome. Yeah, man, it's incredibly bleak. It's incredibly grim. It's pure slavery. The World Cup should not be happening in Qatar. Everybody said from the start it shouldn't be happening, and that's before you consider disruptions to the football season or how the contracts were awarded and other countries that missed out, and so all of those kind of irrelevant political issues. The actual human cost of 6,500 people, that's the official number. The official number is 6,500, and it's going to be a lot more than that.
Yeah, of course it is. I mean, this is the thing. There are obvious arguments against holding a World Cup in Qatar before we get into human rights abuses, let alone before we get into this level of human rights abuse. The treatment of women, the rights for freedom of expression, freedom to practice whatever religion you want, treatment of the LGBTQ community. I mean,
treatment of minorities,
treatment of minorities. Man, across the board, this is about the worst place that you could be holding an international sports tournament.
Maybe Saudi Arabia.
I mean, they're probably on the same level, right? They're
not far off each other, unless you're going to Syria or to deep state Iraq.
Holding it in the former ISIS, in whatever's left of the ISIS.
But what they're doing now isn't much worse,
Yeah, of course.
But there's no way that you can't boycott this though, because the rulers of Qatar are also the main sponsors of Barcelona, and if suddenly we start saying that this isn't okay, well, then you have to look at PSG, you have to look at Manchester City, then you have to start looking at Chelsea. And these are all football club owners that should never have been allowed to get involved in the football clubs in the first place. But FIFA dropped the ball or ignored it, or UEFA or whoever, they were getting paid off at the time. And you can't, it's very difficult to take these assets away from people. Once they have them, once they're in possession of them, it's incredibly hard to reverse everything that's been happened. And if...
Well, you can't.
Well, we saw they own these
clubs.
Well, the Leeds owner was stripped of the club a few years ago, wasn't he? Because of criminal proceedings, or sorry, he wasn't stripped of it, but the FA wouldn't allow Leeds to compete while he was in charge, or whatever it was. So it may come down to the individual FAs having to take a stand against this kind of stuff. But I mean, these clubs have destroyed wage structures around the world, and they've changed football massively. If they were to suddenly stop trading, I mean, there'd be a massive collapse in the market for a start. But it's not going to happen though. This is the thing; they're too powerful. The money at the top of football controls everything else.
You can't go up against these guys. I mean, I think what was the owner of Leeds? He was the Italian guy, wasn't it? Was it?
Yeah,
I can't remember his name. I mean, he's a minnow compared to these guys. I mean, he has money, but these guys have infinite resources. There's no going up against these guys, and that's
saw what Manchester City did to UEFA in the FFP, even though they were guilty. They're on paper that they were guilty, and City just said, "No, we're not having that. Sorry."
Exactly. This is why the World Cup in Qatar is happening. It was awarded through shady means, and because of the money involved in it, there's no way of stopping it now. And I mean, man, from my point of view, the only thing that we can do is, as fans, not watch it, as fans, not travel to it, and then as national teams, hopefully, take a stand against it and refuse to go to play. I think that's a clear and obvious decision, but I think most will. I don't think there's enough noise about it. It's just been, let's face it, it's probably just I don't want to sound too Europhilic, but it's probably just the European teams who would contemplate not competing in it.
And it would contemplate it, and within most of those countries, it would only be the minority kind of the left wing side of these countries as well. Like this isn't being reported on a wide scale across the British media. It's the Guardian and the Guardian alone that are highlighting these issues.
Exactly. Yeah, that's why you mentioned the Guardian. That's why we both mentioned the Guardian. It's like, and the Guardian is a tiny newspaper these days. I mean, the circulation levels comparison to the right wing press, obviously Telegraph being the main right wing, right of center broadsheet, you can't compare it. And the Guardian is ridiculed by a lot of people.
It's the more progressive countries as well. Everyone thinks of Scandinavia, as this progressive utopia, and it's the Norwegians that have actually started this discussion on the international stage, and Germany as well, which, depending on how you look at it, will be considered quite progressive as well. And the Netherlands already coming out saying that they're not going to boycott it, I don't think it's especially helpful. I'd imagine the English FA will come out and say that they stand behind human rights as well, but they won't be boycotting it.
What does that say? What does that say? We stand behind human rights, but we're not boycotting it. No, you don't stand behind human rights, because if you stood behind human rights and actually believed in human rights, then you would boycott it.
Like they did with South Africa, the way Zimbabwe was stripped of Test cricket status.
Exactly. I mean, it's easy to strip Zimbabwe of Test cricket status because they have no money.
Yeah. Same with South Africa. South Africa were skint at the time.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I think it's a harrowing look as to how the world is run. So there's a nice gloomy way, I think.
It's an important discussion to have, right?
Man, it's incredibly important.
And I hope it's not the last one that we have on it, because this is only going to, as we get closer to the tournament, there's only going to be more noise about this, I would like to think. So we'll stay on top of that discussion as well.
Yeah, of course. And I suppose it raises a wider question as well about player salaries. I touched on Haaland there, and I'm not saying that this is on Erling Braut Haaland to change the culture of, these rulers paying colossal fees to footballers while neglecting people in their own countries. Because obviously Haaland is free to go and play for whoever he wants. Lots of great players go and play for these clubs. But when you look at Barcelona and you hear that they're the first club to break €1 billion in debt, that money's all come from the Qatari state, while these people are working for free in the stadium, dying, killing themselves because of the working conditions. While Leo Messi is earning 800 grand a week or something.
Yeah, more than that. I think he's earning about 1.6 million a week in euro. It's obscene, man. I mean,
but does this conversation need to come back to the players at some stage?
Yeah, I think it does, because in modern football, the players hold the power. I mean, you'd love to see. We hear a lot about Mesut Ozil, and the fact that he's had to demand such a high salary is that he has a certain amount of expenses that go to, quite significant expenses that go to charities every month. I would love to hear more about that. That if Haaland did, I mean, in the current market, Haaland is clearly worth the going rate for a world-class player.
His contract negotiation with City or Chelsea, whoever it is rumored to be about £400,000 a week. That
seems about right in the current market. I mean, it's crazy, but in the current market for a world-class striker, that seems about right at his age. You would love to hear of some of that, of a significant portion of that money going back to going into a good cause.
And look, I'm sure it will, but I think there's a wider issue about salary caps, and players should be pushing themselves. I don't think it shouldn't be down to them and their agents to get the best deal for each. Like, man, £50,000 per week. Man, think about
agents. No, agents are money men. No agent is going to be trying to get a smaller deal for his client, because that means his or her client, because that means a smaller percentage for them themselves. And they're going to be, obviously they'll say to all of their clients that football's a short career, so you have to earn as much as you possibly can right now, and you need to earn as much as you possibly can, because we have investments to make in property or whatever to look after you when you retire, so that you have a steady flow.
But this is why the pressure needs to come from the fans to the players, to the clubs. But at the same time, football is worth as much as it's worth, and most of these clubs generate colossal forms of revenue. And if the money is not going to the players, it's just going to the CEOs then.
Or worse, it's going to the owners.
Well, yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But it's just staying at the top. And that's not to say that, if Qatar hadn't blown £1 billion on Barcelona wages, that money would have been invested back into the stadia, because that's I think that's highly unrealistic to expect that's the way it would have transpired otherwise. If Chelsea weren't paying the wages that they're paying, Roman Abramovich isn't going to donate those wages to charity instead.
Yeah, man, this is it's a bubble. The footballing, the economics of football, it's a bubble, and like with all bubbles, there's a breaking point, and there's a point where it's going to burst. Most of these clubs are run on debt.
A lot of the major clubs are, yeah.
A lot of the major clubs are run on debt. Like we're going to see. There's a big possibility, I would say, that we'll see a super club taken down because of its financial situation. And I'm talking about a major club, major player, not like Leeds United getting relegated when they were kind of challenging for the top four and occasionally getting in the Champions League. I'm talking about like Barcelona or Real Madrid, or a serious club. And that's no disrespect to Leeds United.
But man, they'll just start again, though. You look at Juventus when they got relegated 2 tiers. You look at Rangers when they had to dissipate and come back again. I know Rangers isn't necessarily comparable to Barcelona, but all it takes is a new billionaire to franchise that name and buy the stadium, and then suddenly after 5 or 6 years they're back.
Yeah, you're probably right. It's not
like money buys success. You can take take a nothing club, but once it has a big brand and a big reputation and fired up the leagues incredibly quickly, fans will still go if they're especially if they're guaranteed to win every week.
This is. I don't think that enough is said about this. Do you remember when the Saudi takeover was touted? And I mean, this still might. Newcastle still might come back to that. Mike Ashley wants to sell that club. The Saudis were interested in buying a Premier League club, and that was the one that they were looking at. That deal cannot go through.
Well, that move was only blocked because the elite Premier League clubs didn't want another major player. That wasn't blocked on any genuine human rights grounds, because other clubs would have been blocked for the same reasons in the past. You know, it's highly hypocritical for Manchester City to turn around and say, no, the Saudis can't own Newcastle on human rights grounds, or Chelsea to turn around and say that. Like that's incredibly hypocritical. So it's just the fact that they didn't want another major player. Last week, FIFA relaxed the FFP rules. They scrapped that idea and said they're moving towards a new model of financial control, which will allow, smaller clubs to invest whatever they like to compete with bigger clubs. So it's essentially opening it up to more free market capitalism. Go for it. It's a race to the top. Who can spend the most? So look, I'm sure it'll be incredibly interesting when the Premier League becomes a super league, when every single team is owned by a billionaire and everybody's player contracts are worth, several billion per year, and, there's no relegation or promotion, and it's a 10-team league. And look, it's all going to change. The football that we grew up watching, Joe, is a thing of the past, and that makes us sound incredibly old, but it's all going to change over the next few years.
It shows how quickly it's changed in our lifetime as well, because we could, we remember very well when you could create something out of nothing. I don't know, we had the Leicester City success in 2016, but I mean that'll never happen again. I don't think that'll ever happen again.
No, because there won't be newly promoted teams, Joe. The promotion and relegation will be a thing of the past very, very soon. If you look, football seems to be moving towards an American model. Every year we seem to get closer to it, and we'll be doing draft systems before you know it, and there'll be like a 16-team league that's a fixed.
Oh my God, it's going to be like the IPL.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's going to be.
As a cricket fan, man, I do you know what? I'll start watching the EF. I'll start watching the Championship if it comes to that. I don't watch IPL. I don't
start
watch
watching
IPL.
Irish football, man. Put some money into the FAI.
We could go to watch Cabinteely.
Bray Wanderers, man.
Bray Wanderers, yeah. I'm just thinking which is closer.
Joe, we'd never support Cabo. Come on.
I couldn't. No, you're right. I couldn't support Cabinteely. It's just the thought of supporting Bray is also.
Look, I'm a former Bray season ticket holder.
I know you are. Proper grassroots fan back in the day. But in cricket, we would never. I could never bring myself to watch the IPL for precisely that reason, because it's not done the right way. County Championship all the way. So yeah, I think if push came to shove, it'd be great to support an Irish team, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and man, to be honest, it might well be the way that we go. You're seeing non-league football becoming more popular in the UK as well. I think the Maine in the FA Cup highlighted, how lots of big football fans will go and support smaller teams as well. Maine are obviously based on Merseyside, and they actually attract large numbers of Everton and Liverpool and Tranmere fans to the game every weekend, because it's something different to the Premier League one. I think they say that about half of their fans, or over half their fans, are Liverpool fans that enjoy coming to watch a smaller second team. And I think that, look, obviously globally people will still have eyes on the Premier League, but the Premier League will become more of a global thing than an English thing, or at least those top English teams.
I think it already is, and that's the impression that I get when I think Twitter says that as well. I think there's a real disparity between old school football fans and young football fans, and that's not anything wrong about that, because young football you can only digest, you only know what you know, and young football fans never experienced the Premier League when the Premier League when it still had some authenticity about it.
Yeah.
I mean, now it's just entertainment. We might as well be watching WWE.
Yeah, so look, guys, watch this space for next season's FAI Premier Football podcast. We'll be doing live shows from outside the Carlisle grounds every week. Interviewing fans and getting back to the core of real football.
We should be doing that. That would be good. We should be doing that.
Yeah,
that
well,
would be
look,
good.
You never know, man. You never know. Watch this space, Joe. How's the true crime research coming on?
I'll have a look at it this week, Rafe. Yeah, when you're finished your essays this week, right? So we'll be looking
I've got
at
a
doing
couple of
that.
weeks off now. Yeah. So
Yeah. No, we'll do that next week then. That would be great. I can't wait for it. I mean, it only takes a few. Who knows? We could look into the Qatar World Cup. No, I think we'll look into something else.
No, man,
But,
that's a bleak true crime story.
Yeah. Man, any true crime story is bleak if it involves
but
human rights abuse or murder or something.
I think it needs an ending. I think it needs to be solved.
Yeah.
Maybe we need a conclusion.
Yeah. Well, I was telling you there was that nice robbery story in Milan with the lads scaling the buildings and stealing from wealthy people. It sounded a little bit like a little Robin Hoodie. I know as a committed eco-socialist, you probably
on board with that kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah, all right. Well, look, we'll announce the details of that podcast soon enough. We will be back probably next Monday to do a Premier League review, and then hopefully later on in the week we will do our true crime podcast. So stay tuned for both of those things. Joe, it's been a blast this morning. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely, Rafe. Great way to start the day. Perfect way to start the day. And we're due to have some sun in Dublin, which is very rare and it's going to be much appreciated.
Right. Well, look, I'll leave you go. Lather yourself up in sun cream, Joe, and I'll catch you next week.
All right.